What do we expect from the Vikings rookies this year? And the rest of your questions on Locked On Vikings.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day each and every day. I appreciate you all so very much. And thank you so much if you're listening in June as well. All right. I really appreciate those of you who are with me for the Everyman series and all this stuff. And I hope that I'm paying that back. If you're new here, hello, welcome. My name is Luke. You can find the show wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Just search out Locked On Vikings, including YouTube or Amazon Fire and Roku if you download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There is something for everyone every day all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Today is Twitter Tuesday, so I'm answering your questions as submitted to me via Twitter or the Google form in the show notes. You can drop a question there anytime or email it to me at lockedonvikingspodcast@gmail.com. And the first one is one, I'm going to be honest, I would never take this question because if you give me homework, I'm not going to do it on the show. But it is June, and we got the time because it's, you're going to have a lighter mailbag in June, so we can spend a little more time with some of these questions, which I actually really enjoy. Casey the Coolest gave me a whole bunch of rookie over-unders, and I definitely remember when you did this last year. I have no idea what I said. Put it in the comments, Casey, in the YouTube comments, or tweet it at me if you can find it, because I'm curious to see how I did, but I have no idea where that even would be. But we'll go through some of these. He starts with J.J. McCarthy over under 1,800 passing yards. So here's the thing with rookies, too. I'm going to sort of err on the side of the under. 1,800 yards would be half of the season at like a 3,600 yard pace, right? That's a pretty good clip for a rookie. That would be definitely nothing to be ashamed of in playing about half the season. That seems like a reasonable place to set the over-under. But just knowing exactly all the work that they're trying to get done with him, and a possibly more conservative offense, just because it's a rookie, you're going to give him more outlets. You're going to, try to make things move a little bit quicker and a little bit, less susceptible to pressure. So I'm going to err on the side of the under, but I do not do so confidently. It's a really hard one too. Like if you told me he's going to play week 4, then we crush this easy, right? The next one is Dallas Turner, 4.5 sacks. Again, I'm like tempted to just say under. He's a rookie. He might not even get in, but 4.5 sacks and the hype that's coming out of OTAs, I kind of want to say the over and say that maybe we got a real one here. I mean, he was the third defender off the board. Like this is the expectations I think are rightfully high here. So I'm gonna take the over. Kyrie Jackson, 182.5 snaps. So that would be like 10 or 11 snaps a game. I think that's a lot for Kyrie Jackson. We've got right now. I don't even think he's ahead of like Booth and Evans and all those. I think he's like 5th on the depth chart. I think, and I assume you're doing defensive snaps. If we're talking special team snaps, that obviously gets a lot easier. Or he gets in and he plays like 3 full games, and that pretty much covers it. But I'm going to take the under there. It just seems like he's pretty low on the depth chart right now, and he might be incubating a little bit, which is fine. Walter Rouse, 24.5 snaps. You just need one half a game, right? But to hit that half a game, I think you need one or two things to happen. He either needs to beat out David Quessenberry for that swing tackle job, which he's a rookie, we'll see, or you have to have both tackles be hurt at the same time or otherwise unavailable, which is also a pretty tough ask. So I'm going to take the under here, and because I think you just kind of sit at OT4, and congratulations to you for that. The next one is Will Reichard, 6.5 points per game. So I think you set this kind of low. This would put him in the like low 20s ranking in terms of kicker performance. That's actually just a little bit more than what Greg Joseph got, and he like missed a lot. So I think this is a fairly easy over. Plus, y'all, the kicker's getting hype. Like all the beat reporters are like, "Oh my god, this kicker's really good." So like the kicker's got OTA hype, which scares the pants off of me. I don't like that at all. That's horrifying. You're just begging for a letdown. But I mean, I'll reserve judgment until I see stuff with my own 2 eyes, right? But hey, if the kicker's getting hype and we just need him to be literally like league average to hit this, I think we can hit this. The caveat is if the offense gets worse because we've got Darnold and rookie quarterbacks and stuff, it'll probably be a less, prolific offense, a less volume heavy offense. So you might not score as much, and that'll mean, less points. But I think with the kicker hype, I can take the over. I'm gonna take the over. And then the last one is Levi Drake Rodriguez over under 5.5 tackles. This is an easy under for me. I think there's a good enough chance that he just doesn't make the team that I feel comfortable already just like kind of making that the bet, but also plenty of a chance too that he makes the team, but he's a healthy scratch every single game. Like I don't really see him getting in unless he really blows people away. I think he's going to be comfortably behind Jaquelin Roy and Jonathan Bullard, of course, Phillips and all that for a while. And this is going to be more of a long-term deal. Next question comes from Skullmaster, who gives me another over-under. Will Aaron Jones get over total 1,300 yards this season? That is a sky-high number. The FanDuel over-under is like 700-some yards. That is probably more in line with what people expect. 1,300 is really hard. You have to stay healthy all season. That's hard for Aaron Jones. And you have to have a good running game, which is hard for the Vikings. I really struggle to see that number being feasible for Aaron Jones. And I think if you're thinking of, fantasy from a fantasy angle, that's a running back that's going to get most of the snaps will never be too bad of a pick. But I definitely would stay away from him in the first, 3-ish rounds and, get it to where, all right, we've got either guys in a committee or Aaron Jones. Then you start thinking about Aaron Jones. Mischief Enjoyer asks, which offseason addition do you think is going to surprise Vikings fans the most, good or bad? Tonyan is what comes to mind. Robert Tonyan, I think nobody really expects him even to make the team, and I think within the Vikings building, they're a lot more excited about him than that. I think you're going to see more Robert Tonyan than you think you're going to. That might be a surprise. I could also see somebody like Van Ginkel, who just didn't get a lot of fanfare, right? But I really like him being like a really good surprise. In terms of a bad surprise, I think that you could see Dalton Reisner not make the team. I think there's a world where like he loses the job to like Michael Jurgens or Dan Feeney or something like that, and he's like not really the guy that they think he is, and you like cut him. Like I could definitely see that world. He certainly has the contract that like implies that he is absolutely at risk of not making the team. And I think a lot of people will be genuinely floored by that because they see Dalton Reisner as this like bona fide, starter top 10 guard in the league because of a PFF grade he had 2 years ago. Nolan M asks, which interior D lineman do you see getting second most snaps this season after Phillips? What does that player do well or struggle with? It's Jonathan Bullard. I think with a bullet right now, like his main competition is Jaquelin Roy. And I don't see like why that would be different. Jonathan Bullard had a really good preseason. He is a preseason warrior. So like he's going to be a tough guy to win a camp battle against. The thing with him, so he displays a lot of play strength, but he loses his leverage sometimes and he'll get washed out that way. So there's a consistency thing with that. But he's capable of making that flashy run stop that you really hope for from that kind of rotational next defensive lineman type. Shadow Flame asks, what are your top 3 new draft or free agency players to make the Pro Bowl this upcoming season? So I assume you mean Vikings to make the Pro Bowl this upcoming season. Grenard is, I think, got to be the easy one there. He's, all the analytics people love it because he got a lot of pressures but didn't convert them into sacks, and that tends to regress. So everybody really likes that idea. Plus the Flores angle of it all and the versatility. Everybody's really excited about that. So that's definitely one. I could see a world where, the Pro Bowl is interesting because once you get down to like all the alternates and stuff, like there is a really funny world where Sam Darnold gets it just because he's the 12th best quarterback in the NFC and all the other ones said no. Like that kind of thing has happened before and put really funny guys in the Pro Bowl. So I don't know if it's like a top answer though. In terms of additions, maybe there's a weird world where you get like Reichard in, because he just had such a great kicking season and he's the phenom. Are we ever owed that? And then, I don't know, I guess like Dallas Turner, like you could have like a really cool edge duo, put them both in. It would be very Vikings to have that. It would not be very Vikings to have a kicker in. Whole bunch more questions on Twitter Tuesday here on the Locked On Vikings podcast. So we will continue onward. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook, and they have cool deals coming at you every single day. A boost or bonus of some kind every single day for everyone all summer long. Look, baseball is going on. I don't know, none of you want to watch baseball, okay? Who wants to watch baseball? But the WNBA is on, and it's electric. Everybody's talking about it. Of course, you know, the Panthers just won. Basketball's been over. Men's basketball's been over. But there's still a wide world of sports out there in the summer, and you got daily boosts to go take advantage of at FanDuel.com/lockedon. So check back and check back often. FanDuel, make every moment more. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. And when you are done here, go check out Locked On Minnesota Sports. Check out the 24/7 live channel that is all Minnesota sports all the time. And check out the Minnesota Football Party, which is where my next question comes from Grill. And he asks, you mentioned on the Football Party that it's common for Brzezinski to mitigate cap hits in years 1 and 2 of a contract before the big cap hits arrive in year 3. Why is that a popular contract structure? So if you just like start thinking about how these play out and the options they give you and like when problems arise and how solvable they are, it just makes a lot of sense. For one, it makes sense to defer money. I know a lot of people don't like it, but I think you got to think of it differently than you would think about your own finances because there's no interest. And in fact, there's negative interest because the cap goes up. So it's like, what if there was negative inflation? Right? What if I knew that in 10 years, my dollar would be worth twice as much as it's worth now? I'm absolutely going to defer all my payments and try to work things out so that I don't pay it till all my money is worth more. That's essentially what you're doing, right? There's no interest on it, and deferring it down the road, the cap only goes up, so those debts only get easier to pay. So there's just that kind of general principle to it. But the reason it's 2 years and then the third year is like the stress point. So the first 2 years, the cap hit is so manageable and very much uncuttable. So the player is getting all the guaranteed money in those years. They're getting all the signing bonuses in those years. Sometimes there's like multiple signing bonuses, like in the or option bonuses and stuff like with the Justin Jefferson contract. The player's getting his money and knows he's getting his money, so you can get him to agree with it. In year 3, the cap hit gets burdensome but not prohibitive, and it's technically cuttable but uncomfortable to cut. And that makes a lot of sense, right? By year 3, if this is a disaster, you can get out of it, right? If for whatever reason, guy got hurt and he was never the same or something like that, or if there was some falling out or something. Like if there's a disaster, the option exists to get out of it. You're still heavily discouraged from doing that, so the player still feels like they're going to see their money, and you're probably trading him more than you're cutting him. So he's going to see his money still, and there might even be guarantees that like kick in at a certain point, assuming that you aren't going to go do something drastic. But the option is there. The outlet is there. There's an exit ramp is the way I'll call it, if you want it. And you probably don't. And then years 4 and 5, the cap hits are exorbitant, but they're extra cuttable, which means that they're extra restructurable. You can start asking about pay cuts. There's way more flexibility. So the worse the cap hit gets, the more options you have. That's why it's structured that way. You don't have a lot of options in year 1 and year 2, but you don't need them. The cap hit is low. And it's year 3 where those lines intersect, and the cap hit is like kind of a little bit going to be a big one, and the options aren't great, so you still probably just want to pay it. But if you're desperate and you really need to get out, the option is there. Next up, Hjort asks, what is likelier, McCarthy starting a game because we're already playoff safe so we can rest Darnold, or McCarthy starting a game because he's ready and Darnold sucks? I love the Darnold. Or the Darnold. Great subreddit. Go check it out. The first one by a lot, the second one by a lot. The one where McCarthy is just ready and he plays. If Sam Darnold plays so well that the Vikings are like resting starters in week 18 and they've already clinched everything, that feels pretty out of reach. That would be something Sam Darnold has never sniffed in his career. And it's something that I think is beyond what the Vikings are capable of as they are constructed. But the idea of McCarthy coming in and then maybe they sneak into a wild card or something, like that's kind of why you have Sam Darnold, so that you're not just like falling apart and having like Nick Mullins games and going 0-7 so that he's taking over a dead season. You just want somebody to be able to hold down the fort without getting benched until, it's time. And I think that is the plan. Like the second thing is like the plan. The first thing is like a corner case. So it's the second thing it's McCarthy resting a game or starting a game because he's ready is the winner by a lot. Got a lot of JJ McCarthy questions coming up. including one from JJ McCarthy Stan, who asks, is JJ doing well in OTAs? So yeah, the OTA story of JJ McCarthy was superficially, no, he was missing throws, he was late on things, he was struggling with stuff. But basically the coaches privately and publicly and all the beat reporters kind of had this understanding, and the coaches told the beat reporters this, and everybody who was watching understood that this is very work in progress. So I guess the way to put it is he was doing what he was supposed to do. He's supposed to be kind of working through new footwork right now. He's supposed to be learning new things, and now he gets to take it home and work on it through all of June and July before we get to camp, and then we'll really see where he's at. But he learned what he was supposed to learn, and he's taking on new things. They're rough because he's new to them, but like that's the idea. That's what this thing is for. So if you were just superficially looking and saying, God, I got to play a game tomorrow, who's the quarterback, right? JJ McCarthy probably might not even be third. He might even be fourth. But that is very much to be expected. So he's doing as expected. Put it that way. Things are on track. And O'Connell has said as much, his development is on track and stuff, for whatever that means to you as well. Rock NHL asks, how far into the playbook should JJ be so far? How long until rookies usually have the playbook down? This varies wildly. Some rookies never get the play. You could argue Lewis Cine still doesn't have it. Or doesn't have the familiarity and the instinct of it that he's supposed to have, and that's why he's not playing, and that's why he's probably more on the roster bubble than he is, close to starting. But JJ McCarthy has said, and I think other coaches have confirmed that, like, he knows, he's memorized what he's supposed to memorize. He's got that part down. He knows the playbook. The challenge is in getting used to the physicalities of what that playbook requires of you, the different drop timings and the different footworks, and getting those timings and those throw velocities and those throw the ball locations and stuff down to a science is the harder part. I don't know if that counts to you as quote unquote knowing the playbook, but when it comes to just like the memorization part of it, I think he's basically completed that task. Stephen Hall asks, if JJ McCarthy reaches what you perceived as his ceiling, how good do you think that is? I mean, look, I'm not really a believer in ceilings because ultimately the ceiling, the tail end of the bell curve is Tom Brady, right? Like, I mean, you could be just that good. Like he has, I think, the skill set and the arm strength to be like a turbo game manager where everything is so ruthlessly efficient that you like put up a bunch of points. I think there's also a world where you get that improv out of him that's really cool, right? And you get this very like almost Joe Burrow-esque game. Like there's a lot of really great, if you really want to daydream about how good JJ McCarthy can be, sky is the limit. He's a young quarterback. He's a bona fide champion. Like you could go through all of this. It's a matter of, I think, like maybe I've just been covering the Vikings for too long now, where it's just no longer that interesting of a question to me to be like, what's his ceiling? What could happen? Anything could happen. He could also be terrible and flame out of the league in 3 years, DeMarcus Russell style. Anything could happen, and trying to predict what will happen, I think, is a fool's errand. So I like to kind of instead point my analysis to what needs to happen for him to reach these goals. And how are they trying to do it? I think that's more interesting, is what are they doing with his footwork? And I did a whole episode on that a couple weeks ago. You can go check out, going into like the real details, and a Patreon video at patreon.com/LukeBraunNFL, going into the real details of what they are changing about his feet, what they are trying to correct about his throwing motion to make him more accurate on deep balls. That to me is a way more interesting question, and that's the one that I'm trying to answer. But in terms of the ceiling, yeah, sky's the limit. Why not? What are you going to do? Arrest me? Speaking of legal action, Landon Renly asks, the NFL is currently being sued in a class action over Sunday Ticket, as they could have to pay out a number in the billions. If that happens, would that affect the salary cap for next year? So this was a fascinating question. You got me actually going into the text of the CBA for this. Here's what I found. I am no lawyer, so if a legal lawyer or somebody that understands contract language better than me wants to read this and weigh in, I would love to hear from you. You can just Google the CBA. It's all public. But under the section that describes what revenue is available for sharing with the players, and it defines what it, like the specificity of like what it means by revenue, tickets, concessions, TV revenue, etc. There is a part that says like, and here are what we can do for deductions from that revenue. And for example, if a team builds a new stadium and it costs them a whole bunch of money, then that can be deducted from the NFL's revenue, and in the way that like the teams all sort of share the wealth around a little bit. If you spend $600 million on stadium renovations, which I believe is what the Panthers are doing in addition to the money they're trying to get from like the city, then that like technically would get deducted from revenue. And there's a cap to that of like $91 million or something like that can be deducted. Like, so I don't know if lawsuit settlement would count toward that, but the language for what that can be is left pretty vague. So I do think you could that probably is left vague on purpose so that like unplanned expenses are still good. So I do think that would count, but it's really severely limited. 91 mil is not that much considering that the salary cap right now of what is it, 255.4 million for each team. So 255.4 times 32, 91 million is a drop in the bucket. You divide that hit across all the teams, then maybe it reduces things by like 2 or 3 million, but that also wouldn't go into effect next year. It would go into effect like a year or maybe even 2 after the settlement is actually reached and the payment is actually made. Therefore, the expense can be, deducted off of the NFL's revenue. So it would be very deferred and it would be very small, is my understanding. But again, not a lawyer. Any lawyers out there that want to weigh in, I would absolutely love to hear from you. I have a few more questions, and some of them are even about football. That'll be next. Moving right along with this episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast. The next one comes from Sports Guy 079, who asks, do you think the Vikings should be okay with either Nick Mullins or Jaren Hall as their backup or third string QB this year? Or should they try to pursue another backup QB option, such as former Vikings legend Case Cookus? First things first, Case Cookus. Secondly, I think that's perfectly fine. So Mullins is, and Jaren Hall, the thing is interesting to me. I think if it just came down to full merit, I think Mullins would blow Jaren Hall out. I think we kind of saw that last year. And unless Jaren Hall takes a huge step forward this year, which sure he could, never going to count that out, but status quo is leaning Mullins very much, right? The thing is, volatile backup that, that with veteran experience is a box very much checked by Sam Darnold. So I'm sort of two minds here, where if you have Sam Darnold, Mullins is rendered redundant, and instead a younger developmental quarterback is maybe a better idea. But on the other hand, you don't want the idea that, Sam Darnold gets hurt, JJ McCarthy goes in to be like the default state, which if you cut Nick Mullins probably is the move versus putting Jaren Hall in. So I think you still roll with Mullins, but in terms of him as a backup / third string kind of guy, third stringer once JJ McCarthy's in kind of guy, I'm perfectly comfortable with that. I think he's absolutely good enough to be that guy. I don't think that they have to go out in desperation. That said, Case Cookus. MS6 Boy asks, with Xavier Howard being a Flores guy, why not kick the tires? Price or fit or possibly both? I think he has something left in the tank. So I think there's a little bit of bad-itis, and also there is some off-field stuff. You go Google that for yourself, but I think right now I don't know if an NFL team's going to touch him with a 10 football at all. It's probably not price or fit. I think there's just a little bit of washedness that you got to worry about, and that was before the allegations came out. Master of MA asks, which current Vikings might become trade candidates around training camp to recoup some draft capital for 2025? I don't like it. I don't like the idea of trading away players just to recoup draft capital that you can go spend on those players' replacements. If you're doing that, you're like either trying to get cheaper, which runs the risk of getting worse, and you're going backwards, right? The goal is to get better. I feel like that should be a truism, and yet here we are. But the thing is, like, if you're trading away a player, like, let me think of a player who would maybe, like, Brian O'Neill would be an interesting player, right? He would he's past the guarantees part of his contract. He's in the part of his contract where he's expensive and it's flexible. So there's a lot of different ways to deal with that cap hit. If you even want to deal with that cap hit, you can restructure, which I think is, pretty likely, although he's already been restructured a couple times, so there's not as much meat left on that bone. You can try to trade him, you can do the pay cut thing, you can maybe just cut him if you feel like maybe Walter Rouse looks way better than anybody knows, and you do that or something like that. So let's say it's Brian O'Neill, but the thing is, if you trade away Brian O'Neill for cap space and to recoup draft capital, you just have to turn around and spend that draft capital on a tackle again. Don't you? Like, how do you get ahead getting rid of players? This is the part nobody's ever had a good answer to do. The answer is draft a better player than the one you lost, which is like, yeah, just simply do that. just simply win more games, coach. Like, I don't understand why that's not your strategy. You know, like, it's so much easier said than done that I don't think that this heuristic is a very good way to think about it. I think you just roll into a draft with not that much mid-round capital, and then it's over, and then you get what you... I mean, you still have your first. That's important. And maybe you trade down and recoup some picks that way if you need like a bigger influx of young talent. But really what it is you just spent a little bit more because you really wanted Dallas Turner and hope that works. And if that works out and it turned out to be worth it, then you don't have to get back to having the normal amount of draft capital, which every time the Vikings go into a season or go into a draft without a certain round pick, I'll get a question every single week about, you know, if they don't have a third round pick because they traded it for something. And you go, how do they get that third round pick back? Why do they need that back? How do they get a second round pick? That'd be better, right? Or how do they get a fourth round pick maybe if they don't get a third? You know, like, you don't need to have a first, a second, a third, a fourth, a fifth, a sixth, and a seventh. Like, that's like, let go of that sort of need for the even, the like perfectly even draft capital. They spent it on something already. That doesn't mean they lost it. It means they used it on something and they're getting dividends for it early. That's the whole point of trading future picks to trade it up. And that's why the value is the way that it is. Jack asks, do you see Gabriel Murphy making a significant impact on the team in 3 years of the contract? First off, Jack, it's past your bedtime. And secondly, maybe significant impact is really hard for an undrafted rookie. Even an undrafted rookie that should have been drafted, that doesn't help as much as you think it does. But in 3 years, anything can happen. But it's really hard at that position because that position is now locked up. The three guys, Van Ginkel, he's only on a 2-year deal, I guess, but Grenard and Dallas Turner are very much meant to be the two guys now for the next 3 or 4 years. And with very little competition for them, except for Van Ginkel, who's on a 2-year contract and who's probably going to be more of a Swiss Army knife player. And I don't know if they're going to actually compete as much with each other for snaps as you might think. There's going to be a lot of times where they're all on the field and all that. So I don't know. Significant impact to me means like bona fide starter, and that feels like a corner case. It's possible. Anything is, but it's a corner case. David Lyons asks, considering we have Tunyon and Jones on our team, who's your favorite Packer turned Viking of all time? I wish I could say Favre. Recent events tell me I can't really. The pipeline is like the Packers are not sending their best. I guess I'll say there's a lot more Dayton Joneses and, random Desmond Bishops on here. Favre is probably going to be a popular answer if you just decide you don't care about what has been happening with him lately. I think I'm deciding that I do. I'm going to go with Za'Darius Smith. He was just an absolute delight for a year, and then he went and continued to be an absolute delight somewhere else and got us a 5th round pick. We love it. Thank you for that, which helped us, by the way, one of those 5th round picks helped us get our quarterback of the future. So everything about that just turned out real positive, and it was a really fun time when he was here, and I'm still rooting for him in Cleveland. He's the rare, morally justifiable Cleveland Brown. Chris asks, was Zimmer a modern Prometheus by bringing A-gap look-based defense to the league and then being punished for this by missing the kick wide left? Hey, man, anything after the Nixon administration isn't new. It's A-gap mugging was there. He found a way to really make an identity out of it, but he wasn't cosmically punished for missing the kick wide left. There's no God that decides these things. These sorts of things happen to us purely by happenstance, by the cold and unfeeling die rolls of randomness determine who gets to be happy and the great majority that get to be sad after a given sports season. There is no justified nature to it. There is no set of rules. Stuff just happens to you, and there is nothing you can do about it. I will talk to you all tomorrow, and as always, Skull.